Figure it out.
Hello, this is Adam Koralik with Figure It Out Productions. The following video is part of our Quick Shoot series.
Hey guys, it's Adam here, and this is part 4 of my preview series, if you will, of the 8th generation of game consoles. Now going with the last one of the 8th generation is the Xbox One. Now this came out on November 22nd, 2013. Now I've talked a lot about my thoughts on the console already in previous review videos, so I'm not really going to talk about that here. I'm just going to talk about kind of what I think the future of this console might be. The only thing I will say as far as its past goes is it kind of needs to be understood a little bit because it will slightly alter where its future is. Now this console had a lot of plans by Microsoft, a lot of bad plans. All the DRM fascist bullshit they tried to put into it, that basically us, collectively as a group, gamers and everybody, we got them to undo this. And a lot of people was like, no we didn't, Sony did. Sony didn't do it. Sony only did well because we bought their stuff instead. It was us. It's always us. It's always the market that determines what they're going to do. And we're the market. So collectively, we were able to have them remove all of that crap they were going to do that was just awful. Now, that makes them oddly hard to predict, to be honest with you, because all their plans they laid out are now just out the window. So what I'm hoping, and the best I can do really here is hope. I don't know how much of a prediction I can necessarily issue, is I'm hoping that they kind of treat the Xbox One now the way that they kind of treated the 360 in its early few years. Make it game-centric, man. The first few years of the 360 were amazing. You had some of the best, single-player campaign type of games ever. And you had a lot of great online, multiplayer type of games. You didn't have as much repetition. And then, unfortunately, basically when Don Matra got there, they got the brilliant man behind the original version of this shit. I hope that they take it back to that earlier time, where they just focus on the games, man. That's all I really want out of a game console. I don't need the TV sports crap. It's all nice extras, but I want the games, and I'm sure most of you agree with that. If you're really into the NFL and that's why you want the Xbox One, I don't know why you're watching this video, but welcome. Now, so far, it's very ironic actually, because obviously this thing did not start out as a game-centric console, but it's actually, of the 8th generation of consoles so far, is actually where I've had the most fun playing games. And that's because of Dead Rising 3. Go get it. I'll wait. Go over to Amazon, pause me, go buy it, then come back. Or pause me and go to a store. I don't care. Get Dead Rising 3. This game is fantastic. I play it all the time. It's awesome as hell. And to be honest, I haven't had that kind of awesome gaming experience on the Wii U or the PS4. The Wii U I probably could. I just haven't spent as much time with it as I probably should. And the PS4, the games just aren't there yet. But that's just the case. And I think what makes this one really good is that Microsoft basically did what I think they should be doing, which is going to third-party developers and paying them for exclusivity. No doubt a shit ton of Microsoft money made this game happen. It wasn't just a decision that Capcom made. They wouldn't do that. That wouldn't be profitable to them, especially in their dire position. But Microsoft, unlike their competition, can really go after third parties for exclusive titles, which is what they were doing in the first few years of the Xbox 360. But at the same time, that would obviously be bad for their competition, but Nintendo's already kind of irrelevant to third-party developers, and Sony that'll just make them fight harder. And I'm telling you guys, competition is good. Do you really want two consoles that both have all the exact same games? That's not interesting. Neither Sony nor Microsoft are first-party developers. They own first-party studios, in some cases, but they themselves are not game companies. Nintendo is, so you gotta give them props for that. So what I want them to do is go after third-party companies, not buy them, because when they do that, when they buy things like Rare, they just destroy them. But I want them to just funnel money into game studios and have them make exclusive games. Will they do that? I don't know. It's really kind of hard to tell. I do think that Microsoft learned a lesson from all the DRM stuff. They learned it much faster than every other console manufacturer has done historically. I've mentioned this before, but I'll briefly go over it again. The third console in every console manufacturer's lifespan fucks up. It makes a massive mistake. Usually through arrogance of this attitude of, dude, we can't screw up. Do you know how awesome we are? We can do anything. And it is always a bad idea, because they always mess up. Sony messed up with the PS3, after the unbelievable success of the PS2, they're like, dude, who cares if we make a console that costs this much money and we lose this much on every unit? Who cares if it's impossible to program for? You can't do that. You just can't get arrogant. You have to be smart. And this was Microsoft's turn. Now, Microsoft was able, because of just what year it is, they were able to undo most of those mistakes through software. And they were lucky enough in their instance to undo it preemptively and salvage as much of their market share as possible over the rest of, the summer of 2013. So, yeah, I'm glad that they were able to do that and start righting the ship. And it shows. I mean, they're lagging behind the PS4 and the Wii U, but I doubt they'll stay behind the Wii U for very long. I think they've sold about 3 million Xbox Ones at the time I make this video, and I'm sure they'll continue to do that. The biggest mistake that they're still making is the Kinect, which they're going to drop it eventually. Look, I get why the Kinect is in there. They wanted something kind of unique and weird, and honestly, they probably built them all well before the decisions of all the DRM removal stuff was made. So they kind of had to sell them, because otherwise they would just have warehouses full of these things they can't unload that cost money to build. So they had to get rid of them. But don't put it past them. They'll probably do a Kinectless bundle eventually, which is another thing I'm hoping for. Not that it benefits me, since I already have one and I'm kind of stuck with it. I have no faith in the Kinect. I don't think it's going to be anything special. It's already annoying. I never use mine, and we're going to see a version of it without that, because it's going to keep it more competitively priced with the PlayStation 4 and the Wii U. Now, Microsoft has a very unique advantage over its competition. The entire Nintendo Corporation is worth $14 billion. Sony is worth $13 billion. Microsoft is worth like $341 billion. It's ridiculous. Now, of course, Microsoft only has a specific budget for the Xbox division. It's not like Xbox can just use all of Microsoft's money. It is budgeted. It's a major corporation. That's how they do these things. Now, I don't pretend to know what its budget is, but in theory, if Microsoft was so committed to it, they could use that money, like I said, for third-party development or other investments that their competition simply can't keep up with. So they have that potential. Whether or not they'll use it, I don't know. They never really have. So who's to say? What's interesting to me about the Xbox One is something that Microsoft is historically guilty of, is they'll get into bed with another company that they in a business or in a market they have nothing to do with, and they'll kind of get to know that industry well through that company, and then kind of cut them in the bed, if you will. The most historic, famous example is really what they did with Apple back in the 80s. Microsoft was not a particular, it was doing fine, I guess, before Windows 3.1 came out. They had DOS, they were doing okay. And then they kind of got into bed with Steve Jobs, not literally. And they kind of got to know the more advanced versions of operating systems like that, and then they kind of stole it, made a pirated version, turned it into Windows, and then Windows became what it is. I mean, I'm not by any means defending Apple. I actually really dislike Apple products in general. I'm just saying that is a very famous example of Microsoft doing that. They just get used to a certain industry by working with someone who's already in it and then kind of betraying them. They did it with Sega. I don't know how many of you know this. The Dreamcast uses an iteration of Windows. Microsoft was actually really heavily involved in the Dreamcast. They made a lot of stuff for it. Not so much games, but like a lot of applications, and they made a version of Web TV for it, if you guys remember that thing. But actually, your Dreamcast, go look at it. The front of it actually says it uses a version of Windows. At the time, when the Dreamcast was going under, there was such a close relationship between Sega and Microsoft that Sega went to Microsoft like, hey guys, we need your help. We're not doing well. The Dreamcast is kind of tanking, and you guys are close with us. You've been working with us in video games. Look, we get it. The Dreamcast is not going to last. We understand, and we want your help. Basically, you give us the cash to keep the Dreamcast alive for like another year or two, and then we'll help you develop this Xbox thing, and we'll make it backwards compatible with the Dreamcast. We'll give you exclusive support, blah, 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 blah. And Microsoft kind of said, and they didn't do the deal. Now, a lot of people have debated whether or not that was good in the long run. I used to think, how awesome would it have been if the Xbox had been Dreamcast backwards compatible and had exclusive Sega titles. But given what we know about Microsoft when they had kind of absorbed a company, in hindsight, I'm kind of glad they never did, because, yeah. But anyway, so they didn't necessarily kill off Sega, but they really learned a lot from Sega, and then when Sega kind of bowed out, because they had no choice, Microsoft basically came in and took their place. I think Microsoft, much like Sony and not so much Nintendo, does see the writing on the wall. That consoles might be kind of going away. And I'm going to talk about this in its own video, but the short version of it for now, as far as the Xbox One is concerned, is on the back. You see there's the HDMI out feature, which is normal to connect to your TV, but there's that HDMI in feature. And there's such a huge emphasis on TV. I think that Microsoft is trying to get involved in the television and live streaming industry. Now, a lot of people are making fun of them, like, dude, people aren't watching stuff on TV, they're watching it on Hulu and Netflix, etc. Yes, that's true. But what Microsoft is trying to do, as far as the way I see it, is they're trying to get involved in TV and streaming and media. That way, when presumably consoles get phased out and the Xbox division kind of is a thing of the past, there's something else for them to be working on. Microsoft is a major corporation that does a lot of different things, but they're a technology company fundamentally, and the problem in a technology company is the technology constantly changes. You can't sit on that forever. So you have to be willing to adapt, and Microsoft has the way of doing it by, like I said, they get involved with a different market and a different kind of company, get to know how that market works, and then either overthrow them or betray them or just ignore them or whatever the case might be, and start working on it. So I kind of think that their next move is to try and get involved in television. That's my guess. In some sense of television, you know, streaming, whatever it is. I think we're going to see something along those lines. But it's kind of too early to say for sure. And it's not super relevant immediately to the Xbox One, but don't be surprised if you start seeing more specific Xbox media branded stuff, kind of like that Halo series they were talking about. That's a perfect example. They're trying to take a pre-existing thing they're already known for and trying to mix it with something they're trying to invest in and trying to see if it works. So don't be surprised if there's some sort of like exclusive video service on the Xbox One for their exclusively produced content. And then they start to, you know, expand on that. I'm just saying that probably will happen. At least I think it will. But yeah, so for now, the Xbox One, it needs work, and all of its work is software upgradable, and I think those things are coming. So the console itself might give you some really good gaming experiences, and I really hope, like I said, that they try to do a game-centric type of thing like they did for the first few years of the 360s, you know, and then they just stick with that. But they're in a little bit of a position of desperation, but for different reasons, because they don't necessarily want to lose the generation, but how committed they are to that generation is hard to say. So I think they want it to succeed, not necessarily for the same reasons you might think. Like, I think they want it to succeed for the money, obviously, but I don't think they care so much about it succeeding to be the best gaming machine. I think they care about it succeeding so that they can use it as a launching pad for the next big project, which I still think is probably TV. Anyway, that's kind of my predictions on the Xbox One, and yeah, hopefully some of it's right. I don't know. I would rather that... Actually, I would kind of rather I'm all wrong. I just hope that they go game-centric. That is what I would want. Not what I think is going to happen, but it's what I hope happens. So yeah, that's about it. I want to thank you guys for watching this series. I hope you liked it. I hope you enjoyed it to some extent. And stay tuned, because my next video will be the video I keep talking about, where I talk about why this is probably the last generation of game consoles. Although you probably have had some sense of why that is throughout these videos. But anyway, that's it for now. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all later.